I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. Among the biggest mistakes America ever made was the adoption of Medicare, a socialist program that should never have come into existence. We once had the finest healthcare system in history. Prices were low and stable. Going to the doctor was like going to the grocery store. Most people didn't even have major medical insurance. They didn't need it. There were innovations taking place in the healthcare arena that were just phenomenal. Doctors absolutely love what they did in life. When I was a kid, doctors even made house calls. And then came Medicare and Medicaid in the 1960s, which ended up destroying that finest healthcare system in history. This is when healthcare costs started soaring out of control. This is what ended up destroying the system. And doctors started hating what they did in life. A lot of them started retiring early. You ended up with chaos and crisis, a perpetual healthcare crisis. And Democrats have been obsessed with the idea that they could reform and fix this system. That's what Obamacare was all about. It only made the system worse. That's why Democrats are now calling for a full-fledged socialist healthcare system, just like they have in Cuba, where the government controls the whole thing. In fact, Democrats extol the healthcare system in Cuba, which is a socialist system, of course. And the Republicans are no different. They've thrown in the towel. They've accepted Medicare and Medicaid as a permanent feature of American life and have come up with just a series of reforms to fix the system, such as health savings accounts. It's a futile endeavor by both Democrats and Republicans. You can't do it. You can't fix an inherently defective system, and the socialist system is inherently defective. The only way to restore health to America's healthcare system is a repeal of Medicare and Medicaid, the end of all government involvement in healthcare. The other half of this thing is what we've seen during the pandemic, where the federal government and the state and local governments have exercised powers that are unbelievable, that are found in dictatorial regimes like in China. The mandatory lockdowns, the mandatory vaccine requirements, the mandatory mask mandates. In a genuinely free society, we let people work these things out on a voluntary basis. We let restaurants establish their own policies. Let customers decide which restaurants they want to patronize. Let people decide for themselves whether they want to get vaccinated or wear masks or whatever. We don't mandate these things in a genuinely free society. What about the poor people in a genuinely free society? I grew up in the poorest city in the United States in the 1950s, per capita income. That was Laredo, Texas. Every day, doctors' offices were filled with people that they knew couldn't pay, many of whom were from Mexico. It didn't matter. I never heard of one instance where a doctor turned away anyone for inability to pay. And notwithstanding that fact, doctors were among the wealthiest people in town because they were making plenty of money off people who could pay. But they helped out others on a purely voluntary basis. So did the local hospital that was called Mercy Hospital. They didn't turn away people because they were unable to pay. They relied on donations to help them out. That's the spirit that we need to recapture in America, where doctors and hospitals are helping out the poor on a purely voluntary basis, and where we use free market principles to determine the allocation of health care and to determine the supply and demand for health care. If we were to get rid of these two socialist programs, Medicare and Medicaid, and get rid of the regulatory programs, the interventionist programs like the Centers for Disease Control, the FDA, and the others, we would go a long way to restoring the finest healthcare system in history and to restoring a healthy and free and prosperous and harmonious society. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president.